You may have seen this footage this week of another angry motorists getting annoyed, a passerby actually this was, by Just Stop Oil protesters who were carrying out an eco-demo. You can see the footage on the screen now if you're listening along. It's a passerby who's grabbing all of their banners, knocking a phone out of someone's hand who is filming the whole thing, throwing the banners to the side of the pavement, those well-known orange banners. This was actually Just Stop Oil protesters who were slowly marching through the streets, so still holding up some traffic in order to have their protest. And apparently this passerby was saying, I worked in the fossil fuel industry and you are talking, well, rubbish, we'll say. So that was the moment this happened, and it's being described as quite a violent scene because apparently there was some pushing and shoving. One of the protesters was pushed to the floor. Now, of course, you can't endorse violence taking place, but I think a lot of people listening and watching may understand the anger behind that when it comes to motorists and people who are affected in their day-to-day lives by some of these protests. Let's now talk live here on Talk TV to the Just Stop Oil spokesperson, James Harvey. Morning to you, James.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I have a strange craving for peanut M&Ms, but...
yeah, well, just be careful with those. James, when you look at footage like that, though, it is obviously frustrating for people that they are being disrupted by you guys. And obviously what you're doing is you're pushing the burden on normal people day to day, and it's an argument that has been made many times before, rather than those real people that can actually change policy, or some of the countries and the embassies of those countries where the emissions and the fossil fuel emissions are so much higher. A lot of people would accuse you of saying, well, look, it's a really easy target to target motorists and normal people just going about their day-to-day lives. So why is that a good strategy, do you think, to get people on board?
Yeah, well, firstly, that they were shocking scenes actually yesterday, seeing some of those people get thrown to the ground. But I do understand the frustration that normal, everyday people have. I mean, these are normal, everyday people that are protesting as well. There's doctors, nurses, plumbers, electricians. They're ordinary people too. And again, the government is deflecting issues onto ordinary people. You were talking about this earlier, how the elites are sitting there all neat and tidy and quids in. They're making billions of pounds, for example, off the fossil fuels at the moment. We saw the extortionate profits from Shell and BP announced recently. And meanwhile, we're in a cost of living crisis and ordinary people are suffering. And ordinary people are being made to think that they're the ones that need to change, rather than our criminal government and the fossil fuel companies that they back.
But I would put you in that category as well, though, unfortunately, that what you're also doing is disrupting day-to-day people's lives. You are taking money out of their pocket by not allowing them to get to work easily. So when I talk about the burden being put on normal, hard-working people and how awful that is, I include you guys in doing that.
Yeah, and you're right to, because we are impacting the public.
Well, stop.
However, what choice do we have?
Many more choices.
We've written letters, we've signed petitions, we've talked to MPs. It doesn't work. Nothing's changed. The government, I mean, we can talk about the net zero strategy, but really they're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, aren't they? They're not doing anything meaningful. And meanwhile, we've got floods in Italy that have killed 13 people and displaced thousands. Somalia, one of the cities, is underwater. In east of England, where I live, we had harvest failures last week, wildfires, actual houses burning to the ground. Now, we're disrupting a few minutes of people's lives every day in order to get the government's attention as well as the media's attention, so we can talk about these issus.
But again, a lot of people, again, and I know these are questions you've answered in many different ways before, but why don't you then just stand for election? I don't understand why you would then be able to make real change. And I've seen many of your interviews before where you claim the public are really behind you. Well, if that's the case, then you'd surely get voted into Parliament and you'd be able to elicit real change.
Well, there's a few things I can see you've got pictures of Morgan and Marcus up on the screen there, who are currently in prison for up to 3 years for taking direct action, which is just extortionate jail terms. But on the election front, look, the political system at the moment, a lot of people feel isn't fit for purpose. It won't make the changes quickly enough because it's so bound up in governance and lobbyists. You've got Tufton Street telling them that net zero strategies are incompatible with economic growth. We may go down in history as the only civilization not to save itself because it wasn't economically viable, for heaven's sake. But interestingly, on the election front, just to let you know, I did stand in the local elections and I got elected as a Green councillor. So
okay, but why didn't you? What about for as an MP?
As an MP, well, who knows? Maybe I'll build up to that. But
but surely that's the route. That's your route. It's not about you building up to it. If you're saying, it's interesting to me that there's this terrible catastrophe taking place right now, but you'll build up to being an MP. Surely now's the time. Get out there.
Got to wait for elections. They're not till, the money's on maybe December 24, I'm not really sure, or early 25. But, OK, there's a democratic way through Parliament of doing stuff, but it's not quick enough. It won't get the results that we need. The UN is saying we have a brief and rapidly closing window to ensure a survivable future. It's not us. It's not just Up Oil saying this. This is climate scientists. This is the UN. This is the International Energy Association. I can rattle off loads of others if you want. But the fact is we've got to start making these changes now. And the current government is not, they're criminal in what they're doing. They're actively killing people with their policies.
But the problem that you face, though, is that what you are asking for, which is to stop oil, the issue that you have is that we stop oil, we do not have the technology in place yet to run the grid on solely renewables, and so we would be stopping our only form of energy security in order to transition to technology that isn't there yet. So how could we just stop oil?
It's really frustrating because if we started this process 20 years ago, when we should have done 30 years ago, we'd have a robust grid, we'd have renewables, and we could be world leaders.
That could have been when you stood as an MP as well.
Well, yeah, maybe, but
no, not maybe though. You can't just sort of come along now and disrupt people's lives and say, well, maybe we should have done that years ago, because that would have been the time if this catastrophe was taking place. All of these groups could have done that then.
Yeah, but okay, so. We're not talking about, to address your question about stopping oil and gas and coal, because the government wants to open a new coal mine in Cumbria, which is taking us back to, I'm sure Jacob Rees-Mogg will like that. He likes Victorian stuff, doesn't he? But the fact of the matter is renewables are much cheaper than oil and gas, can come online much more quickly than oil and gas, and we should be investing a lot more into them. We're not talking about switching off oil and gas overnight. It's about new projects.
Yes, but if we have enough left, as your own literature says, for probably about 8 years.
7 or 8 years, yeah.
So what in 8 years' time would we do if we don't still have the battery and storage capacity, which isn't there yet, we'll probably get there, but a lot of people are saying sort of mid-century will be when it is there. So we stop oil in 8 years, the capacity is not there for the batteries in order to run on solely renewables. What do we do?
That's what's so exciting. The opportunity is there now to really turn things around. 7 or 8 years is a long time. I mean, look at the response we had in the pandemic. We turned things around.
So you acknowledge it doesn't exist yet. You want us to phase out oil for something that there is an opportunity to try and develop. There's an opportunity to sort of get it there. But you acknowledge it doesn't actually, what you want us to transition to doesn't actually exist yet.
Well, the renewables exist. We've got massive wind power. We've got the opportunity for solar energy and tidal energy in this country. The grid, we know we have some issues with capacity-wise, but we've got 7 or 8 years to
That's not long enough. That's not long enough. The technology isn't there yet. And look, if it was there, if we had the battery capacity to run the grid at a constant, and that means that it's got to be able to have the storage capacity so that when the wind isn't there, when the tides aren't strong enough, all of those sorts of variable factors with renewables, in order for me to be able to go into my bedroom and turn my light switch on, there needs to be storage. Now, that's not there yet. So, I mean, great.
In 8 years' time.
But it could be in 8 years' time, but that doesn't mean it will be.
Yeah, look, we need a combination of solutions here. Renewables is definitely the answer going forward, but we also need to consume less overall as well. Our energy consumption and general consumption in the West and in this country is absolutely huge compared with the Global South. And it's in the Global South where countries like Bangladesh, India, Somalia and the east of Africa, where one person is dying every 36 seconds at the moment. The inequality is massive. We've got inequality in this country, and you've got these billionaires, these millionaires, and the government sitting at the top of the pile, lining their own pockets, and it's just not right.
You know what? Should we take an early break and then come back to you? Because I want to put a couple more of those points to you. If you don't mind holding on, James, really appreciate you talking to us this morning, and well, we'll find out what you've got to say about some more of those points, and we'll find out what you have to say at home or wherever you may be listening to this, and whether you're compelled or convinced. You know, I want to give them a fair crack of the whip. If you're convinced by what James or Just Stop Oil in general have to say, absolutely fine. Where I worry is simply where I've been stating that we want to get rid of the reliable source of energy, which may be damaging, for a source of energy that is hopefully going to come, hopefully will be there, but isn't there yet. To me, I don't know whether a responsible government would transition to that yet. Morning, Cristo here on Talk TV, still joined live by James Harvey, one of the spokespersons from Just Stop Oil. Morning to you, James. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. So I'm going to put to you what I just said before I went to the break. I think it would be grossly irresponsible, and I think what you're asking for is grossly irresponsible, for a government, a responsible government that is responsible for making sure that energy is available. And let's not forget as well that the advancement of fossil fuels has created a situation where crops can be grown, where people are warmer in their houses. The number of people that have been saved and the number of people whose lives have been and standards of living have been improved by fossil fuels is immeasurable. I would put to you that it is grossly irresponsible for you to be campaigning for an ending of those fossil fuels when you are asking for a technology that has not been invented yet for us to transition to. What would you say to that?
Well, solar and wind and tidal is an energy source that's there at the moment. We just need to expand upon it, as you've rightly pointed out, and improve the grid as well. However, talking about irresponsible, look at what our government's doing at the moment. They're still implementing policies that are affecting normal people in this country, that are causing deaths, that are causing food shortages. You talked about fossil fuels and the advances we've had off the back of them. Brilliant. I mean, yeah, you can't dispute the science that we've had and the advances that we've had that have made our standard of living so much better. However, those same advances are now destroying us.
But you're not answering the crux of the issue, though, I'm afraid, James, which is, what do we do in 8 years if the battery capacity isn't there? What do we do? We've not given any more new licences, the oil and gas is running out, nearly gone, and the battery capacity is not there for us to run the grid on a constant. What do we do?
Look, you can get clever.
No, that's what you're asking for. That is what you're asking for.
Yeah,
this is what you want. This is your big idea. So you should know how it's going to pan out. And if you don't, then I would say, what on earth are you campaigning for?
Well, one of the things I definitely want to say is if we don't stop new oil and gas, which is our one very clear ask, we're going to be in a really bad situation. We're already seeing thousands of deaths every year, every day in some parts of the country.
And how many deaths do you think we'll see if in 8 years' time we don't have the battery capacity to have people with heated homes? How many deaths do you think we'd see then? How many deaths do you think we'd see if we didn't have the capacity to be able to grow food more easily?
Okay, look, do you want to look in a future that all the scientists are telling us is going to cause millions of deaths and billions of people displaced around the world, which is already happening in some parts of the world? Or should we try for something better? That's what's so exciting.
But I don't disagree. And if the technology was there, if you were saying to me, great, it's absolutely going to be there, that the technology is done, it's invented now, and now we can start phasing out the other forms, I'd be saying, yeah, I completely get your logic. But you must surely understand that what you are campaigning for as a group is essentially for us to get rid of the reliable source of energy for a shot in the dark. And that, to me, would be grossly irresponsible, and people would die.
Well, people are dying now because of the emissions.
But why would you want us to move to a... I don't think I'm going to get there with you.
I've got a niece who's 9 and I've got a nephew who is 11. I'm 47. One of my main concerns at the moment is I don't think they're going to live as long as I will.
Well, they certainly won't if in 8 years' time they can't heat their home.
Well, isn't it better to try for a solution that's going to save millions of lives?
Absolutely, but I would not be just stopping oil until that technology is in place. That's what we should be doing. When the technology is there, that's when you campaign. You don't campaign now for us to move to something that doesn't exist yet.
The technology is there. We've got solar panels on people's houses right now.
The technology to keep the grid running is not there.
Yes, the grid has got some issues, but that can be improved upon.
That's not the issue with the grid, that's an issue with the battery capacity, which doesn't exist yet to run the grid, battery capacity which hasn't been invented yet.
It's all that technology is improving all the time, but
it's not there yet, is it?
Pretty black and white to me. We change, so we make an effort to go renewable, we make an effort to lower our consumption, we change our farming practices, all that good stuff, or... my niece and nephew won't.
Talking of good stuff, what will my life look like then in 8 years' time? Will I be able to go on holiday, fly abroad in the Just Stop Oil world?
I would suggest that we all need to reduce our reliance on aviation, but look at the I mean, I cycled around the coast of Britain in 2013. Our own country has got some amazing places to visit. Why not do that instead of flying off to like some kind of...
So you are campaigning for us to no longer be able to fly abroad?
No, I'm campaigning to stop all new oil and gas.
No. I'm telling you now, you're campaigning for me to not be able to fly abroad.
I'm campaigning to stop all new oil and gas because that's what we need to do.
Well, according to your website, in Life After Oil, which was a blog that was posted on Just Stop Oil's website on April the 14th, where there was a Life After Oil, doesn't talk about people needed to probably wear more coats in their homes because there isn't any heating. We're told that you will be better off by making some sacrifices. People will be better off. They don't fly abroad on holiday anymore. They share essential resources like vacuum cleaners, DIY tools and a camping kit. They rarely buy new, but there's still an abundance of choice in clothes, books, electronics and furniture already in circulation. So you're suggesting that not only do we transition to getting rid of oil, but I have to borrow my neighbour's jumper, I'm not allowed my own vacuum cleaner, and I can't go on holiday to see my family in Greece.
I think what we're suggesting by that... all that
written on your website, so...
is how much better society could be if we actually build those communities again and start working together on stuff. You know, we grow food locally, we make an effort to grow food in our back gardens. That would help with the cost of living crisis as well.
So you're seriously, your pitch is telling me that my life would be better based on what I've just said?
The life would be different. I mean, we're in a mental health crisis as well at the moment. The current way of life is not suiting a lot of people. Let's try something different that, one, will potentially make a much better life for everyone, but also a survivable life for everyone. Is that not what you want?
Well, I tell you what, the thought of not being able to go and have a few days in Greece, that's going to affect my mental health. The thought of working hard, not being able to get on a plane and have a holiday, that affects my mental health. The thought of not being able to go to a clothes shop and buy some clothes for my niece because I've got to go and find a jumper that my neighbour might have wanted to bin, that affects my mental health. You're living in respectfully in fantasy land if you think people are going to be on board with that, and I'm afraid to say many people will think that's your real agenda. Actually, what you are looking to do is restrict people's lives and freedoms.
Just wondering, if you don't mind me asking, how old your niece is?
If you're going to play the whole, well, she might be like not surviving in a few years, I'm not going to do that because I want her to have the freedoms and the choices that I have had, and that includes going away and having clothes.
So, James, I'm just coming in from the side here. It's Renee. I have a 4-year-old. And I want her to have the opportunity that I had. I want her to travel the world, meet different people, see different people, not be told where she can and can't go, what she should eat, how many clothes she could buy. And that's what you are suggesting.
No, it's not. Okay, let's just clear this up once and for all. Just Stop Oil is campaigning for no new oil and gas because that's what the climate scientists are screaming from the rooftops that need to happen. The UN are telling us this. Antonio Guterres says we're on the highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. When are people going to start listening to just... It's like, have you watched the film Don't Look Up? Because this is what it feels like. You've got this massive meteorite that's going to wipe out civilization, and yet people are more worried about going on holiday and what jumpers they can wear.
Well, firstly, as I said, I'm worried about those things because I'm quoting from your own website. But I would suggest, and this is something that we were talking about earlier this morning, if you want people on board with what it is that you are selling, firstly, the only way in which you can do that is to say, look, this is how we can incentivise you to do better. We want the government to incentivise you to do better, and we want a life where we get all of these things. We get less carbon emissions, we get fewer fossil fuels being used, but we do that in a way that does not restrict your future freedoms and does not restrict your future life, because you need people to be on board with where you're coming from. And if your pitch is to say to people that you can't have a car anymore, which is also part of your post-carbon community that you're talking about, you can't ever go abroad, you're restricted to the UK. That's not giving people the freedom of a nice life in the future. That is restricting freedoms, and people will not be on board with it.
Well, I could talk a lot about restricting freedoms. If you look at what the government's doing at the moment with the public order bill, I think we're sleepwalking into authoritarianism. It's really scary.
Well, and you don't think telling me I can't go on holiday abroad, can't have my own car, and I need to buy used second-hand clothes, you don't think that's a form of authoritarianism?
Not telling you to do anything. We're suggesting that we need, we're saying, and the climate science is saying that we need to change now, or we're going to we've already locked in a lot of extreme weather events. It's already happening. We need to change now, otherwise the death toll is going to continue to rise, the mass migration is going to swamp us in other parts of Europe. What choice do we have but to try and make a better world for everyone? All
right. Listen, James, you've been a good sport. I appreciate you taking on board a lot of those points and answering those questions. That's James Harvey, Just Stop Oil spokesperson. Really like to know what you make of that. We'll return to that conversation in a moment. Quietly seething at times there, Renee. But, I'll return to the point I was making. I think their pitch needs to be about how our freedoms can be maintained by getting to this, rather than our freedoms being restricted.
Not undoing all of the benefits that we've got from oil.
Yeah, and because, again, what you're doing is you're putting the burden on the individual. And those people who are the elites that he speaks about, and it's quite a valid point that he makes about the elite top of society polluting, they're not going to be affected by any of these changes.
Absolutely
We would.
not.
I wouldn't be able to go abroad. You wouldn't be able to go abroad. I wouldn't be able to drive to the shops. And that's not respectfully how I think that your pitch is going to get people on board.